Hello, and welcome to A Layman Looks at the Word with Hal Richardson. Today we're starting a brand new program called Proofs That the Bible is True. We're going to try to show you several examples of things outside the Bible, and some, of course, that are exactly with the Bible, but archaeological finds, physical things that prove that the Bible was written by men that were inspired from God and is absolutely true. Have you ever talked to anyone about the Bible and they say to you that the Bible's not true? They claim it's myths or legend that cannot be trusted? In these lessons, we're going to dive into the archaeology that have proved the Bible true and show you actual evidence. I give credit to the late Ron Wyatt and his wonderful discoveries, and Unearthing the Bible, which teaches many finds over time that prove that the Bible is accurate and true. The Old Testament was written in Hebrew and Aramaic from the time of Moses, about 1250 BC, to the time of Malachi, which is about 400 BC. The Jews carefully copied these scriptures as the old ones wore out. It is called the Masoretic text. The prophet Ezra sealed the 39 books that we have today of the Old Testament so that none could be added or removed. By the time that the English Bibles were in print of great numbers to be distributed, the accuracy of the hand copies was questioned by the skeptics. In 1947, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, which had ancient Old Testament scriptures, as well as many other ancient writings that were buried around 200 BC. These proved that the Masoretic text that was used in the English translations of the Bible in the late 1500s, and especially the King James Bible of 1611, which is the most widely bought book every year in the world, are accurate with what these ancient writings say. So the Bible we have is the same Bible that they had 2,200 years ago. The New Testament scriptures were written in the first 200 years after Jesus' death and resurrection. There are many others that were written after that, but they were heretical, and the church fathers chose a canon of the New Testament and sealed it so that no books could be added or taken away. This took place in the councils of Nicaea, Laodicea, Rome, and Hippo. These were all in the 300s. Most all of the New Testament was written in Greek. The most translated is that of the received text, or the Textus Receptus, which is used in the King James and is very accurate. Some of the so-called older texts that have been found have many words and verses that are removed from the received text and are used in the newer Bibles printed in the early 1900s. This tampers with sound doctrine. In my opinion, and millions more, is that the King James Bible is the most accurate Bible out there. Many things in the Bible had to be instituted by God for the anomalies that could not be added by men and are seen as the fingerprints of God in that Bible. See my teachings and blog on the marvelous 1611 King James Bible. In the 1600s, many of the original writings from Antioch and around the world were still available to the translators of the King James Version. The skeptics claim that many of the books from the 300s and the 400s were removed from the Bible. Well, that's not the real truth. For the ones in the Bible were carefully considered and needed to agree with the concept of being breathed by God through men and agreeing with the apostles and those epistles that were written by Paul, who wrote half the New Testament. So the Apocrypha was never really included in the Bible. It's interesting reading, but it's not necessarily God-breathed. As a matter of fact, it is not God-breathed, but does have some history. And there's some other books from the Dead Sea Scrolls that have history too that are to be read, but there's only one scripture. Everything has to agree with our current Old and New Testament that have been sealed. The Great Flood of Noah. The Bible tells us that God sent a worldwide flood to destroy the evil that had almost taken over men and animals in Genesis 6. The angels that rebelled against God had come to earth and had children with earth women. Their offspring became giants, or the Nephilim, who were only evil and a genetic monstrosity. These fallen angels also corrupted the animal kingdom by genetic manipulation. God chose Noah and his 3 sons and their wives and had him build a great ship or ark of huge dimensions. Noah's genetic line was perfect. God picked a pair of each animal, male and female, that had not been corrupted. But of the clean animals and birds there were 7 pair. All of these and their food were loaded onto the ark, and from them the earth was overspread after being on the ark till the waters were dried up, which was a year. This took place 1,656 years after Adam, or 2344 BC. These times are taken from the genealogical record of the Bible and the time of Jesus, estimated at 4,000 years from Adam. The skeptics do not believe the flood ever happened. The flood isn't taught in our education system anymore, or in fields of science today. Every fossil and seashells on the highest mountains, layers of the sediment laid down one layer perfect on another, are all explained away to keep the knowledge of the flood from being taught or believed. However, there are many other written records that record the great flood. In ancient cultures, there are about 270 different flood stories out there in the world. But we'll talk about some of the ones that we got hard evidence for. First are the Ebla tablets. These are 1,800 clay tablets and 4,700 fragments that were found in Ebla, Syria. They were found in 1974 to 75 by Paolo Mattei at the Tel Marquis, and they date 2500 BC. They tell about the creation of the world, an old Sumerian cuneiform script, as well as the Great Flood. The tablets were found in an ancient library and had been hardened by a fire that destroyed the palace with which they were stored. Next is the Sumerian king list. These were found in Nippur, Iraq, and they were published in 1911. It is a list of the kings that ruled in the area of Samaria. They tell of the Great Flood, and that man was given authority to rule on the earth from heaven. Before the flood, the kings lived to be very, very old, but after the flood, they were much younger. The Bible tells us that before the flood, man lived to be in the 900s, and after the flood, less than 200 years. The next ancient discovery that we have is the Gilgamesh tablets. This is a story of the epic, and it's an ancient story from around the time of Nimrod, which is about 2,000 before Christ. The 12 tablets were found in Iraq near Nineveh by Hormuzd Razam in the mid-1800s. The Gilgamesh is probably the oldest written record that's ever been found. He's a king of Uruk, near Babylon, and the epic is the story of his adventures. It mentions one great god, the Creator, and it does mention the worldwide flood. As we said before, there's about 270 versions of flood stories that have been found around the world. And there's other similarities with the Bible. The flood was one of judgment and punishment. Only one righteous person is told of the flood. The ship only had one door, and the ship came to rest on a mountain. So we see that all the cultures of the world go back to the flood. They all talk of the flood. And if you look at just where mankind come from, you can't get any closer than going back to Noah and his family, where everything began for us. That's going to conclude our study for today. And we're going to continue talking more about the flood and other proofs that it existed and did happen, as well as the rest of the Bible, as we continue in our proofs that the Bible is true. Even Jesus talked about the great flood, and he talked about it as it was real, because it was. And while we're talking about him, he's the center of everything in the Bible, is Jesus and him coming to the earth and dying for us and taking us in a future to be with him all the time. If you don't know him today, I pray that you would ask him into your life. This is Hal Richardson. Join me next time. We'll be studying more of proofs that the Bible is true. Bye for now.